If you guys would be seated where you are, I just want to just change things up a little bit. I felt like I had a really, really good message in store for today. And so if you want for a nominal fee for me to come to your house and give you the message that was going to happen today, I'm certainly available for that. And I had a really, really cool angle on the story of Mary and Martha. But if you'd like to discuss that at a later time, we certainly can. Um, this happened in first service as well. Just a feeling of we need to move in a little different direction today. Um, and I want to ask a question, and I think that as I ask the question, I know what your answer will be because it's my answer too. Have you ever felt inadequate? Meaning, whatever it may be, you feel inadequate in whatever part of your life. I'm sure you probably have felt that way at a lot of points in your life. I have felt that way a lot of times when I think about the things I'm supposed to do, or the things I've left undone, or the task or the expectations that are upon me. Sometimes I look in the mirror and what I see staring back, I don't feel like can meet those expectations. And it leaves me, as I'm sure it leaves you sometimes, feeling like what you have isn't enough, and you don't know if you're going to be able to do what's in front of you. And you just feel ill-equipped or unprepared, inadequate. And that can lead to questions about beginning to think about your worth as a person. Well, I can't do this, so what does that mean? I mean, does God still like me? I mean, all these kinds of things enter into our minds when we have those feelings of inadequacy. And I just want to talk a little bit about that today, that when we're carrying things that are really too heavy for us, we have burdens and life circumstances and the reality of what life can be, that it can leave us feeling just not up to par. And we try as much as we can with our own strength and trying to come up with these results in our own power, and it just doesn't work. And so what do we do when we feel those feelings of inadequacy and we're heavily burdened? So I'll start here. I met my wife on a blind date in the summer going into our 10th grade year. And she saw me and didn't run, so that was a good sign. She stayed there. We had a great time. Our friends that were with us, it was a little awkward because they had dated for a while, and we didn't like them very much for the way that they left us alone and made us feel. But we connected and, got really close and dated, broke up, dated, how high school can be, and on through college, dated, and then finally got engaged, and we're engaged for way too long. Let me just say, if you're engaged, don't be engaged for a year and a half. That's just way too long of a time period. But anyway, that's just not important to the story. But so we've known each other for a long time. And as I got to know Alice, there's one thing that was very clear to me about her. First and foremost, probably one of the most genuine people that I know. Really genuine, and what you see is what you get with her, and just a beautiful soul. And another thing I learned about her as we got closer was her desire to be a mom. Like, that was one of the big dreams that she felt like the Lord had placed in her heart. Is she loved children. And she, as a teenager, was a candy striper. That means she volunteered at Children's Hospital. She was helped the nurses there, and she was in all those places. She did all those things. She went on trips, and she loved kids. And knowing that, I began to share that with her as we grew together. And it was a desire of her heart that became a desire of my heart. Dudes, for the most part, just don't think that way. But when Our Lady does, we begin to think differently. And so that began to be a desire of my heart, and we wanted to have lots of children. And So we got married, and at the age of 24, and we've been married for 22 years now. And so I'll do the math. I'm almost 47, so you don't have to do the math there. But so we got married at 24, and we thought, hey, we're gonna take a year, and we're gonna tour the world and travel. Which we were poor, so which meant like 10 miles around Springville where we live. We might venture out to Steele, Alabama, right, and enjoy the town. But we didn't go very far. But we had a great time, and we thought after that we would have some children, and and a year came by, and another year went by, and another year went by, and another year went by, and nothing, no children. And in those moments when that's the desire of your heart, and for me, watching her be broken over this desire not being met, um, I do recall questioning a lot of things. God, why did you place this desire inside of us if it's not going to happen? Like, why is this dream here if nothing's going to happen? Like, that's cruel to me. And so I begin to question a lot of things, even about the Lord. I begin to question his goodness. I begin to question who I was as a person. Like, am I just not worthy to have this? My wife thought the same thing, and it was hard, and we felt it was really difficult, and I felt just terrible about myself, and it was a tough journey. And then we went the route of infertility, and if you've ever traveled that route or know someone that does and you haven't, give grace to those people. That is a tough, tough road to walk down, and a few ups, but a lot of downs in that journey. And so we start the infertility treatments, and we're thinking, hey, boom, we're going to get some medicine, and we're going to have a litter. It's going to be awesome. And so we go through another year, and nothing happens. And before you know it, it's been 6 years, and nothing's happened. And we go through all these tests, and I'm going to tell you, like, for a guy coming into this arena, the tests that a male has to do in these infertility treatments are, you learn humility really quick, because in front of strangers, you have a robe on at one point, and then the next point, you don't have a robe on in front of 3 or 4 people, and it is a wild ride, to say the least. And I can remember this one time. I'm sorry I'm telling this story, but it's okay. You're going to love me anyway. I remember this one time I had to go in for a test, and I had a robe on, and then I didn't have one on. And so I'm standing there like, hey, like that's me just standing there. And this lady walks in, and I'm just like, oh, God. Like, it's the most awkward thing you could ever imagine. And so, like, the nightmares you have, like you're in school without clothes on, like in your dreams, like it literally was my reality. So I was standing there, and this lady walks in and asks a few questions. And, I'm just like, I don't really want to talk to you or look at you is what I'm thinking. And she says this to me, and it's funny now, but it wasn't then. She says, hey, you look familiar to me. And I said, okay. And she goes, I wonder where I know you from. Like, I'm standing there, like just standing there. And she's like, hey, where do you work? And I'm like, I mean, I don't know. I work in Trustful. At the time is where I work. I work in Trustful. And she goes, well, what do you do? And I just don't want to have small talk at this point. Like, I just don't want to talk about anything. And she said, what do you do? And I said, I work on staff at First United Methodist Church of Trustful. That's where I worked at the time. And she goes, well, isn't it a little small world, right? My husband and I have been visiting there for the past 3 weeks, and I thought I recognized you. And then she said, don't worry, I won't tell anybody what I've seen. And I'm like, thank you. I appreciate that. HIPAA laws, that was my reality. And so there were some some ups and some weird downs, and it was crazy. And through all of that, that was a very difficult journey. After 6 or so years, we were able to conceive and have a child, and Alice was pregnant, and it was a beautiful 9 months. And we wanted to have more children, but we just couldn't after that. There was nothing happened. The treatments didn't work. But she was pregnant, and 9 months pregnant. It was just beautiful to see my wife. She was happy. It's what she wanted to do, was to carry a child, and it was just awesome. And So she's pregnant, and it's time, and we go to the hospital, and everybody's there, and it's just great, and we have the baby, and it's wonderful. Nurses are coming in, checking on things, families in and out for like 3 days straight. It's just like a nonstop parade of people, and we're tired, but hey, if you want to sleep, you can send the baby to the nursery. Like, we were those people, we sent our baby to the nursery so we could sleep. So don't judge me for that, but we did it. And it was awesome. And then came the time where a person walked in we hadn't met yet and had paperwork and said, it's time to leave. It's time for you to go home with your family. And I thought I would be really, really excited. And we get ready to leave. I pull the car around, and it's raining profusely. And pull under the awning and open the door. Alice gets in, and then I pick up the car seat with Sydney in it, and I put her in the back of the car. And I come around, and I sit down in the front seat, and I just sit there. And I don't do anything. It seemed like an eternity, I'm sure, but it was probably 30 to 40 seconds. And I'm sure Alice was just like, what is happening right now? And she looked at me and was like, handsome husband who's great at life, what's going on? And she didn't say that. She said, babe, let's go. Like, if you know my wife, that's what she's like. She's like, let's go. And I just sat there, and I was just overwhelmed with everything. And she said, are you okay? And I sat there again, and tears began to come down my face. And she's like, oh, you're happy. And I'm like, I'm overwhelmed. Like, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can be a good dad. I had a terrible dad. I don't want to be that dad. Like, I don't know. I know how I am. I was telling myself all this stuff. I know I'm selfish. What if I break the baby? What if I let her down? What if I let you down? What if I let the Lord down? Like, what if I can't be what I mean, just before I even got out of the gate, I felt like a failure. And I felt so very inadequate. And I know we've had moments. I know you've had moments like that where you just can't go forward because of how you feel in the present. And I had to go home. I couldn't stay at the hospital anymore. We had to leave. And we went home, and it was hard. It was hard for a couple weeks. Like, I was a mess. And I remember during the course of that time period, like, things didn't change. Like, it didn't stop raining on the way home. It's not that kind of story. It was a terrible ride home. And I remember, getting home or on the drive home, it all kind of just goes together. I had this thought in my mind, and I attribute it to the Lord because it was just so the opposite way that I was feeling and thinking. I was like, this has to be God because I don't feel like this. And the thought was this: you're at the end of your rope, and that's okay. That was the first ray of sunshine for me. It's okay that you feel like garbage. You're at the end of your rope. And then that thought was this, I believe it was the Lord. Well, you're at the end of your rope. What if you grabbed on to my rope? Like, what if in this moment, like, you grabbed on to me? And you didn't worry about everything that you're not. Maybe you just concern yourself with who I say that you are. That was not the way I was feeling, so I think that was the Lord. And he's like, what if you just trust me where you are as you are in this moment? Do you get nothing else? What if you just trust me in this moment? What if that would be a first step towards life for you? Is to trust me, who I say that you are, and what I am providing for you to be able to walk through this. You know, when you're in the middle of a storm or in the middle of the forest, that's all you see. But God is always working, and he's good. And in a moment when I was in the middle of the mess the most, he spoke, and I began to realize everything I needed like I had it. Not that I would magically be a great father and get it right all the time. That's not what I'm saying. But the Lord was like, you have a spouse beside you. You have a community around you. You have a church family for you. What if you just trust me? You don't have to handle everything on your own. You don't have to try to walk through it by yourself. Be vulnerable and invite someone to help you. And like this was the thoughts that were coming into my mind that I believe was the voice of God. And it was so encouraging, but it was difficult to admit as someone who is supposed to be a strong person. I'm a minister. I'm supposed to have it together. It was hard to say, I am overwhelmed, and I don't know if I can do this. It was hard for me to say. And the Lord was like, that's what trusting me looks like. Saying, asking for the help that you need. And eventually I did climb out of the hole, but I didn't do it by myself. I still felt inadequate and overwhelmed a lot. And I'll let you in on a little secret. Sometimes I still do. Sometimes I still feel that way. Life has a way of making us feel that way. We get to the end of our rope. And what do we do when we can't create the outcome that we want? What do we do? You know, one of my favorite scriptures that I think speaks to this, Matthew, it's way too small and I don't have my spectacles here to read my Bible. Matthew chapter 14. It's a beautiful story. And it's one of my favorite passages about the feeding of the 5,000. And 5,000 was the men that were counted there. It was a patriarchal society, so they only counted for the most part men. And so with women and children present, you're talking 10 to 20,000 people were there at this miracle. But before the miracle happens, I think there's something very impactful that has helped me in moments of being overwhelmed and stressed out and those feelings of inadequacy and are things ever going to get better. I'll read Matthew 14, chapter 13, and I'm reading from the New Living Translation, God's translation. As soon as Jesus heard the news, and the news was that his friend John the Baptist had been killed, just horribly killed by a king there, and he was upset. Like Jesus was a fully human being, and he was upset and broken. How do we know this? It says after he heard that news, he left in a boat to a remote area to be alone, to grieve, to be broken. It says, but the crowds, the 10 to 20,000 people, heard where he was headed and followed on foot from many towns. And I love this. Jesus, he was in the space he was in, but here's what it says. Jesus saw the huge crowd as he stepped from the boat, and he had compassion on them. So first, what I want to say is this. No matter how busy you think Jesus is, he sees you. He sees you. Where you are, how you think, he sees you. And he has compassion on you. He is moved, compelled to do something about what he sees you in. His compassion, and he heals their sick. He makes them whole. Like, this is what Jesus is doing. So he's ministering to these people. And it says that evening, which lets us know that for many hours this had gone on, Jesus having compassion. Like, he never relents. Like, this is who Jesus is. He's always working. Always. It says that evening his disciples came to him and said, "This is a remote place. It's already getting late. Send the crowds away so they can go to the villages and buy some food for themselves. People are hungry. Let's let them go get some food." But Jesus says, that isn't necessary. You feed them. Now, remember when I asked you if you ever felt inadequate or unprepared or ill-equipped to do something or to meet an expectation? Think about that question. Jesus says that isn't necessary. You feed these 10 to 20,000 people. And the disciples say back in verse 17, "But we have only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish." You know what that response was to Jesus? What we have isn't enough. Can't do it. We can't do the thing you have asked us to do. It's impossible. Can't do it. And so those feelings of inadequacy, I'm sure, are resting on the disciples. Can't do what Jesus has asked us to do. And then what I think is one of the most beautiful verses in Scripture in the context of the story that it flows in is verse 18. The disciples say, "This is all we got and it's not enough." And then Jesus says in verse 18, "Bring what you have to me." I love that. Bring what you have to me. Bring your not enough here. Bring your broken to me. Bring your overwhelmed to me. Bring your failures to me. Bring your inadequacies to me. Bring your selfishness to me. Just bring it to me. This is what he told the disciples. He said, "Sit down on the grass." They did nothing but sit on the grass. And Jesus took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and he looked up towards heaven and he blessed them. And then breaking the loaves into pieces, this is a great part of the story. He gave the bread back to the disciples, and they distributed it to the people. And the very thing they could not do, Jesus gives it back to them to do. And they were the ones that pass out 5 loaves and 2 fish to 10 to 20,000 people. They couldn't before. But something happens, and now they're able to do the thing that Jesus has asked them to do. In verse 20, this is interesting. They all ate as much as they wanted, the thousands of people, and afterward, Jesus showing off, they picked up 12 baskets of leftovers, one for each disciple. And it says about 5,000 men were fed that way, in addition to all the women and children. And so, that is a miracle. Here's what I want to point out. The miracle does not begin when Jesus blesses the fish and the loaves. The miracle began when the disciples took not enough and they gave it to Jesus. That's when the miracle began. When the people who were broken and inadequate didn't have enough, and they trusted what they had into the hands of Jesus. And then Jesus takes not enough and blesses it, and then hands what was broken, hands it back whole, and now life and nourishment and health can be had by all of those people. This is what Jesus does. And so what if today, if we find ourselves at the end of our rope, if we find ourselves walking through a difficult situation, and it's heavy, and it feels impossible, what if today we took what was in our hand, doesn't matter what it looks like, and we just presented it to Jesus as an offering to say that I trust you with what I have. Whether it's good or whether it's bad. Whether it's enough or whether it's not enough. Whole or broken. Jesus, here. Take it. I trust you to do the work that only you can do, that I cannot. And I believe that he is good enough that he will take broken and he can make it whole. But he won't force you to do it. He just offers an invitation. Bring it to me. And so today I want to encourage you with what you're carrying. What if you just brought what you had, good or bad, and you gave it to him, and you trusted him where you are as you are with what you're carrying today? And maybe part of that trusting is to be honest and tell someone what's really going on in your life, what you're really carrying that you're holding. You don't want people to know about because you're afraid. Part of Jesus mending back together what's broken, and part of you trusting him is maybe finding someone you can trust around you. You see, our lives were never meant to be lived out alone. You are surrounded by a community of like-minded people. And we need to invite them along and into the journey. And this is where our hope and our healing, I believe, a lot of it comes from. It's from the people around us. God working and working through people that are around us. That could be what trusting him where you are as you are today could look like. It's inviting someone in, talking with someone, asking someone, will you pray for me about this because it is owning me. And everything looks good here when I walk in the doors today, but I am hurting and I'm broken. What's in your hands? And would you trust him today with it? And maybe today you could offer it as an offering to him. And today I want to do something a little different. Maybe we could, as a physical step, an act of trust. I'm not saying you have to, but I'm asking maybe you can. Of what you're carrying, maybe today you could take a step and you could come down here and you could hold up what you have in your hands and you could kneel before the Lord at the altar and give him an offering today. A physical offering where you kneel before him and say, I trust you with what's in my hands, and I give it to you. And you may have never done this before. You may not be comfortable doing it, and that's okay. We love you, and it's okay to not be okay, and it's okay to take a step. Because we're all on that journey and in the same boat together. All of us hurt. All of us carry heavy burdens. And Jesus is good that he says, come to me, everyone who carries heavy burdens, who's weary. And he says, I will give you rest. But you're going to have to trust. And so maybe today the first step could be in front of some people. It may be hard, but I'm going to walk down and I'm just going to pray. And I'm going to give this to the Lord. And I want to invite you to be so bold. And I also want to say this, not to give you a way out to not do it, but if you don't come, don't beat yourself up. The Lord loves you. And I just want to encourage you to trust him and take a step today. Even if it's a little hard. To take that step.